Every woodworker needs a workbench, but not every woodworker has a shop full of tools to build one. So how in the world are you supposed to follow all these YouTube videos showing you how to build a simple workbench when you're just getting started out and only own 2 cheap tools? Well, that's where I come in. Hi, I'm Spencley, and I'm going to show you how to build this rock solid workbench using only 2 of the cheapest tools that I could find at the home center, a drill and a circular saw on Spencley Design Co. Before we get started, here's what you'll need to pick up at the home center to build this. You need 1 sheet of 3/4 inch thick plywood and some 1 1/4 inch long screws. Yeah, that's it. Seriously, I told you that this project was very doable. And when you arrive at the home center, you'll walk down the plywood aisle and be greeted by an insane selection of warped, wavy Lay's potato chips. You want to stay clear of those and avoid them at all costs. I know that you're like me and you're really cheap, and your spouse probably reminds you of it every day, but trust me, you do not want that crap for your workbench. Instead, be judgmental and pick out the most expensive sheet of plywood that your home center has. For me, it's this stuff called sanded plywood at about $75 a sheet. If you can't find the label, it should be pretty easy to spot because it's the only one that's reasonably flat. Now, you're up for the real challenge, and that's attempting to find one of these carts to load your plywood on. Once you've acquired that rare lumber cart, head on out to the parking lot because if your store is anything like mine, the panel saw in the back of the store has been mysteriously broken for over 3 years. And even if yours is functional, I wish you the best of luck getting one of the angry workers to cut down a sheet for you.
Hi there. Is there a project you're working on?
I know more than you.
All right.
Oh, and before you leave, pick up some of these 1 1/4 inch long screws. My pickup truck hasn't gone through puberty yet, so there's no way that I'm gonna get this massive 4 foot by 8 foot sheet home without cutting it down. I bring with me some pieces of foam insulation, scraps of wood or sawhorses to lay my sheet of plywood down on the ground before grabbing my circular saw out of the trunk and getting some super weird stares from people in the parking lot. I'm using this Craig rip guide attachment that makes it super simple to get accurate cuts without the need to measure so that I can quickly get home. But you 100% do not need this, and I'll show you more when we get back to the shop. With that panel cut down, I can easily pop both of the pieces of plywood inside my truck, as well as the foam pieces, and don't forget the circular saw. I'll use some ratchet straps to secure all of the plywood in my truck so that it won't move as I'm driving. Now, I literally live 2 blocks away from the home center, so I don't need to really go crazy here. But if you are getting on the highway, make sure that you pretty much go overboard with the straps and make sure that things are really locked down. Now, let's get out of here before I get some weird stares. Back at home, I can release the straps and get all of the plywood safely inside my shop. And what's the purpose of me showing you all of that? I want to make this accessible to everyone watching, so you can see that even with a prepubescent truck, you can make this project too. Now that I've got the plywood at home, I can start breaking it down into smaller pieces for the workbench. And before I get too far, I do want to let you know that you can download this for yourself down in the description below. Oh, and because I realize that you are probably building a workbench because you don't have one, I'm gonna be doing this entire thing on the floor. Since I don't want the blade of my circular saw to dig into the concrete floor, I laid down those same sheets of foam insulation to give me a safe place to cut into. Like I said in the parking lot, you do not need that special circular saw guide for this project. You can 100% just raw dog it and rely on your eyes and hands to guide the saw along your cut line. Now with just a little bit of patience, you can pretty accurately rip down all the strips that you need with just using a circular saw. However, if you want to have your circular saw be a little bit more accurate, a little bit more repeatable, and not rely on the steadiness of your hands, that's where this comes into play. And that's this Craig rip guide. This is super simple. It's just an arm piece and this sled base piece thing. The sled will slide onto the arm, and you can easily lock it down to whatever specific measurement that you need. Then take any circular saw, even the cheapest one that I could find at the home center, and it clamps down with 2 screws. Now, without needing to measure or make sure that my hand is perfectly guiding the saw, I just rip a strip that is the perfect width every time. Here's a clip that's in real time to give you an idea of how fast you can rip an 8-foot long strip, even with a very underpowered circular saw. The next strip that I need is slightly larger, so I can quickly adjust the measurement on the guide to dial in the exact measurement that I need. Now, a table saw would 100% be much faster at doing this, but the intent of this video is to show you that you can make virtually every project that I make with very limited tools. All that buying more expensive tools does is allow you to accomplish tasks faster and more repeatable. I can do almost the exact same things with the circular saw as I do with my table saw. One last adjustment on the guide, and I can rip down my final strips for this workbench. You'll also notice that there is dust everywhere as I make these cuts. That's where people start becoming obsessed with dust collection. But at this stage in your woodworking game, you're not there quite yet. With all of those main strips cut down according to those free plans, let's quickly jump into SketchUp so you can better understand how this workbench is going to come together, and you can actually follow what I'm up to instead of just watching me mindlessly cut down pieces of plywood. So here's a digital rendering of what I want the workbench to look like. To make things easy, let's separate the build into 3 main parts: the 4 legs, the shelf brackets, and the shelf panels. Each leg is going to be made up of a 4-inch wide piece and a 3¼ inch wide piece joined together at a 90-degree angle. Inside of those 4 legs, there are going to be 2 shelf brackets that hold everything together. On top of that lower shelf, I'll plop on a panel to give me a super strong lower shelf for holding tools and stuff. And then on the top bracket, I'll put that last piece of plywood to act as my workbench top. Hopefully that clears things up and makes it a little bit easier to follow along with what I'm doing. So let's get back to building. So with that larger sheet of plywood broken down into some more manageable strips, I want to start on the workbench by focusing on making the legs. So I'm going to grab these 4-inch strips and cut them down. These legs need to be cut to about 35¼ inch long. To make sure my pieces are identical, I stack one strip on top of another and make a super simple crosscut with my circular saw. And while there is absolutely nothing wrong with just taking your circular saw and guiding it across by hand, if you want to get your cuts to be super accurate, try using a speed square or this crosscut guide. What this does is create a perfectly straight edge for your circular saw to run against, which takes all of the guesswork and accuracy problems out of play. You just make the cut and you've got perfectly straight edges for your legs. So now I've got these 4 leg pieces here that are 4-inch wide pieces, and then I can grab some of those other strips and rip down the other pieces for the legs. After measuring the length of the legs again, I like to use my speed square to transfer a straight line across the boards just to make sure that my cut is in fact perfectly straight. I also like to clamp my boards together to make sure that they don't shift during the cut, which would throw my accuracy way off. It might seem time consuming, but all these little extra steps really make sure that your pieces are as accurate as possible, and that will make the assembly of the workbench substantially easier. So now that I've got all 8 of those leg pieces, I can start the process of joining them together. To make the legs, we're just going to take one of the thicker strips and one of the thinner strips and join them together to make a simple butt joint. Just grab some screws and drive them into the edge of the board, trying to stay as close to the center as possible. But chances are, you'll run into a little issue like I did here and then over here too. But this is entirely preventable. Now, one method to prevent the screws from blowing out the wood is to pre-drill and countersink your holes. This is a special bit that makes a guide hole for the screw to go into, and also a little recess spot on the top for the head of the screw to sit inside. It definitely takes a little more time, but it prevents the wood from splitting out on you, which never looks good. Now, there is absolutely no issue if you want to make your legs like this, but what do you do if you don't want to have all the exposed hardware? Well, I've got a super simple method, and perhaps you've heard of it before. It's called pocket holes. This is the cheapest, most basic pocket hole jig, and it comes with a special drill bit. All you have to do is clamp the small jig onto your workpiece, insert that special drill bit into the jig, and drill out the hole. The metal stop collar there lets you know how far to drill in, so you literally can't mess it up. After removing the jig, you've got this neat little pocket here. Now just repeat the entire way down the board, and you can start driving those pocket hole screws in place. So that's a pretty easy way to make sure that there's no visible hardware on the outside of the leg. However, this is the first pocket hole jig that I bought about 3 years ago, and since then, there is a much faster way to do this. This pocket hole jig literally does the exact same thing as the cheaper one that I showed you previously. The only difference is speed. Just grab your leg piece, clamp it down with the auto-adjusting clamp, and then grab your drill to drill out the pocket hole. You can instantly tell how much easier this upgraded jig makes things. Not to mention, it solves the dust collection issue that I talked about earlier. And like I said, it accomplishes the exact same thing. A few more pocket hole screws can be plopped inside those pockets, and I can drive home the screws to secure the leg pieces together. So it's probably pretty clear that this was a substantially faster way to put the leg together, but both methods are still exactly the same. The only difference is the speed. And if you want to go even faster,
now, is there anyone out there who wants to go fast? Anybody?
I want to go fast.
check this out. This is something that I picked up about a week ago, and it's made pocket holes even faster. I literally just pull this handle and it does all of the work for me. And again, you get the exact same outcome with the pockets, it just takes a fraction of the time. Grab some more screws, plop them into the pockets, and then drive them home to create that fourth leg. So now with all four of those legs put together, let's set these down and focus our attention on making these shelves. The purpose of me showing you all those different methods for assembling the legs was not to bore you or flex on all the different tools that I have. It's to show you that regardless of what you have access to, you can very easily make all of the projects that I show on my channel. The only thing that you gain by buying a more expensive version of a tool is speed and accuracy. If using a circular saw and speed square takes way too much time for you, jumping up to a miter saw accomplishes the exact same thing. The only difference, again, is that a miter saw is faster and more accurate. When I started out, I would watch other YouTube channels with tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of tools in their shop and think to myself that the only way I can build what they're building is if I also have those tools. This video is proof that even with very, very modest tools, you can build exactly what I built. And after cutting all of these pieces, we've got pretty much all the pieces cut down, ready to build the shelves for the bench. These brackets are going to be assembled with simple butt joints like this. Now, just like with the leg, you could absolutely just take some screws and fire them through the outside. However, I want to make things look a little cleaner, so I'm going to take these pieces here and throw in some pocket holes. I also forgot to mention that because Craig wants to support me and the woodworking community, they're providing every single viewer free plans for this project and every other project I've got coming out during the remainder of this year so that you can build them for yourself, no cost. I'll leave a link down in the description below for you to pick up these plans. With all of those pocket holes drilled out, let's grab those pieces and start assembling the shelves. Actually, I think I'm gonna go inside and get some tacos. I'll finish this tomorrow.
The next morning.
All right, well, let's get back to building our workbench. Real quick, I want to interrupt and answer a question that I commonly get in the comments section, and that's, where did I come up with the design or inspiration for this build? Well, the first requirement that I set for myself was because I wanted this to be approachable. I wanted it to be that you only need 2 really budget entry-level tools to build this. And second, I didn't want anyone to have to go buy tons of material, so I wanted this thing to be made with 1 single sheet of plywood. And for the design, well, it's literally just a wooden version of the metal bench that I have now. But let's get back to the build. You know what? I just realized I have no way to attach this to the top unless I put some pocket hole screws in here. Well, I guess I gotta gather up these pieces and put in some more pocket hole screws. No big deal. Here's the truth about woodworking videos you see on YouTube. It may seem like creators never make a single mistake, and that since you make mistakes on your projects, that you're a failure. That literally could not be further from the truth. On every single project that I make mistakes and forget to do things. All right, now we're good. It is normal and it is part of your growth as a woodworker. Every single one of us makes mistakes. Just have fun building and don't compare yourself to others. These pieces are going to go together like this, but my floor is nowhere near flat, and having a flat surface will make things 100 times easier, so I'm going to use this large piece of plywood that I have left over to create a flat work surface for myself. The other thing that makes driving these pocket hole screws together much easier is if you use some clamps to hold the pieces tightly together. Pocket holes have a tendency to make pieces shift as the screws are being driven in, and the clamps help prevent that, which makes your life way easier. And with 1 shelf bracket done, I can repeat the exact same steps to create another bracket. Oh, have you heard about the podcast I started with my friend Zach from Zach Builds? It's called Off the Cut, and every week we hang out and talk about what we're working on, behind the scenes stuff.
Like little things that keep happening, and those views theoretically should be just as valuable for the sponsor, but nobody wants to pay you for those.
How to grow your business, and even have guests like Jonathan Katz-Moses on to tell hilarious stories.
Jason Grissom wants to know, can you share a time from your younger years that you look back on and think, what in the hell was I doing? Anybody got one?
Oh, is this for everybody?
Sure.
I got a good one.
Okay,
go
man,
for it.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
If you're interested in checking out the show, it's available on every streaming platform, and there's a link down in the description below. All right, so now that that second shelf bracket is screwed together, that was hard to say, let's cut down this last panel of plywood and make the tops for both the shelves. To cut down the large panel for the bottom shelf, I'll first lay down the shelf bracket that I just made and mark where I need to cut this larger panel. I honestly don't care what the plans say, because if I messed up earlier and my brackets are slightly smaller or slightly larger than they're supposed to be, the plans are pretty much useless here. Instead, I use a referential measurement and I can cut the panel to the exact size that I need. A few more clamps, and I can drive all the screws to hold on the shelf securely. Now let's get to the good part, the final assembly of the bench. I again use 1 last scrap piece of plywood I've got as a flat surface to work off of before grabbing 2 legs and setting them down. I can then set the top shelf bracket in place and secure it to the leg with 4 screws. One tip I have here is to offset the screws from one another to help keep things as secure as possible. With the top bracket in place, I can plop the bottom shelf in place. It really doesn't matter what height from the bottom the shelf is put at, but I did about 10 inches from the bottom of the leg. Again, drive 4 more screws into each leg, and we've got the start of a workbench. While I continue on attaching the legs to the workbench, if you made it this far in the video, leave a comment down below that says hot dog. Starting your question or comment off with the word hot dog lets me know that you actually watched the video, and the engagement is a massive help in growing my channel and getting it out to even more people. And if you really want to help support my goal of quitting my day job and taking this channel full time, consider becoming a Patreon member. Patreon is where you get to watch every video before it's released to the public. This video, for example, my patrons got to see 3 weeks before it was live here on YouTube. You can also pick up plans or merch from my website too, but as always, there's absolutely no pressure, so let's just get back to the build. All right, flip this thing over. Now let's get that top cut down. We got ourselves a workbench. The great thing now is that since we've got a workbench to build on, I can trim the top to its final size using the workbench. And it is much easier than working on the floor. Uh-oh, I made another mistake. Well, it helps if I actually have the depth on my circular saw set correctly. All right, let's try that again. This is what I mean. Literally everyone makes mistakes. There we go, that's a little bit better. You definitely could just leave the top oversized so it hangs over the edge of the workbench, but I want mine to be nice and flush. So the last thing I need to do is trim the length of the top before flipping the workbench over and attaching the top with some more pocket hole screws. I can already predict the comments saying that this workbench isn't going to be strong enough and that it's just going to collapse as soon as any weight is put on it. Well, I weigh about 210 pounds and it can easily support me jumping on top of it. And to prove it's strong enough, here you go. That's all I got for this one, and I'll see you on the next one.